I'm going to start off this evening by introducing the members of the Charter Commission to you. I'll ask each of them to stand or wave their arms or do something to indicate who they are. Our chair is Don Starks. Don is also a current member of the Appropriations Committee in town. Vice chair is the esteemed Larry Levine. Larry's the former chair of the member of the school committee, a former chair and member of the Board of Selectmen, and he was also a member of the 2004 Charter Commission. Our secretary, Russell Denver. Russ is a current member and former chair of the Appropriations Committee and a former member of the Capital Planning Committee. Bill Fonseca. Bill is a member and current vice chair of the school committee. George Kingston. George is current member and former chair of the planning board, former member of the Conservation Commission, and former chair of the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. Me, Eric Madison. I currently chair the Appropriations Committee in town, and I formerly chaired and was a member of the Capital Planning Committee. Ray Miller. Just dawned on me I had a slideshow for all of this. And it's working good as planned, right? So let me keep going while our technical guy works on this. Ray Miller was the member of the 2004 Charter Commission and former chair and member of the Appropriations and Capital Planning Committees. Tom O'Connor, who is not here tonight, is the current chair and member of the Capital Planning Committee, former chair of the Register of Voters and member of the Election Commission in town here. And Ralph Page. Ralph is here, current chair and member of the Planning Board and current member of the Community Preservation Committee. Hey, we're back in business. So what I'm going to do here tonight, I got a quick presentation. I'm going to try to run through this. We want to leave as much time as we can for questions. I'm going to run through each article, really only highlighting certain parts of that article. I'm not going to go into detail on every section of the charter. We'll be here all night. So I've kind of bullet pointed each section as we go. So Article 1 is where the division of powers are established. This section establishes the legislative powers of the town council, or with the town council, formally done at town meeting. And I say formally if the charter passes, so bear with me on that. Additionally, it establishes the power of administration, prudential, and municipal affairs of the executive branch with the town manager. Most of these are currently conducted by the Board of Selectmen. This is one point where I just kind of want to stop and point one thing out. There's been a lot of confusion, and we've heard an awful lot about people saying the council is just a larger Board of Selectmen. I kind of want to clear that up a little bit. The council has an entirely different role than our current Board of Selectmen. Most of the responsibilities of the current Board of Selectmen will become the responsibility of the town manager. Although there are a few executive roles of the council, the majority of the council's role is legislative. Article 2, Section 1, it talks about the composition and membership of the town council. This is where we designate 7 members, all elected at large. We're not recommending districts. Each of them serving 3-year terms staggered, with exception, folks, of the very first election, and later on in the presentation I'll explain that one to you. It further goes on in Section 4 to outline the council procedures. A couple of the bullet points I wanted to point out: the frequency, at least monthly. Now they can meet more than monthly, but at least monthly by the charter they have to meet. Requires that the public has the right to be heard at all council meetings, including subcommittee meetings. So if the council breaks into subcommittees to look into a certain matter or do a certain task, those subcommittee meetings also The residents have a right to be heard at those. I will point out that there is no language in the charter restricting these to, I keep hearing 2 minutes. There is language in the charter that allows the council to adopt rules that would obviously to some extent limit the public comment section. I mean, if we think about it, if they're going to have a 2-hour meeting and 1 hour and 45 minutes of it is public comment, the council's not going to get a whole lot done. So, but there's nothing in there about a 2-minute rule. The majority of the council constitutes a quorum under the rules, and the clerk, and by clerk, when we refer to the clerk, we're referring to the town clerk. The town clerk is also the clerk of the council. The other thing I kind of want to clear up here is there is nothing in the charter that schedules council meetings during the day. In fact, the charter is silent as to when the council meetings are held, other than they have to be monthly. One would assume that the residents that run for and get elected to the council probably have jobs, and therefore necessity would dictate the council meetings will be in the evening, as they always have been in our town for elected boards. Article 2, continuing the general powers and duties, the council will hold all corporate, legislative, and appropriation powers, enact bylaws, rules, regulations, and orders, appoint the town manager. The council would be the licensing authority, and we did put in there that the council must, on an annual basis, evaluate the town manager's performance. That would be a public process with a public document. Under town bylaws, the form and proposed bylaws must be in, and posting requirements are all dictated in section 6. They must be read at 2 separate meetings before they can be acted upon, and it requires a majority of the council to pass by a roll call vote. I do want to point out here that by state statute, zoning bylaw changes require a 2/3 vote of the council, just like they require a 2/3 vote at town meeting. I saw the moderator here. Is he still here? Is that a correct statement, sir? Okay. So the council still has to adhere to that. 2/3 of a 7-person council is 4.6, I think it is, so it requires 5 members of the council, of the 7-man council, to pass a zoning bylaw, to change a zoning bylaw. Section 10, prohibitions. The town council or town council member no town council or town council members shall give orders or directions, either publicly or privately, to any employee of the town not appointed by the council. The commission felt that it was important to clarify that the council members cannot act independently, and they do not supervise town employees, with the exception of the town manager. So this chart illustrates the current structure of our town government. In the background work that we did in the early stages of our meetings.
Excuse me, can't see it. Can you tell what the titles are?
Sure. Okay, along the top row in red, there's represented the board. So there's Board of Public Works, School Committee, Housing Authority, Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Assessors, Library Trustees, and Moderator. These are all elected positions in the town of East Long Meadow. Underneath each of the given boards would be the areas that they manage, if you will. So underneath the DPW, there'd be the streets, the water and sewer. Under the schools, there's the superintendent of schools. Underneath the Board of Selectmen are departments, because there's a variety of numbers and the box was way too little to list them all. Finance and boards. Let me see. Going away over to the library trustees is obviously the library. And under the moderator would be the appropriations and capital. It is worth noting that capital is done The members of Capital are appointed in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen, correct? Okay. This represents the structure under the proposed charter. One thing that I want to point out is this structure has been operating successfully in our town for many, many years. It's been operating in the school department under the very same structure. Under the school department, the voters elect the school committee. The school committee appoints the superintendent of schools. The superintendent of schools then supervises his principals and so on. His principals then supervise the teachers and so on down the line. We're suggesting the same structure for the town. So the voters elect the town council. The town council appoints a town manager. The town manager supervises the Department of Finance, the Department of Community Development, the Department of Public Works, Police, Fire, IT, all those others, and then also the appointed boards and committees. Under Article 3, in Section 1, Appointments and Qualifications, the Town Council appoints a town manager. Section 1 requires that the town manager to be especially qualified by education and training with prior experience as a city or town manager or assistant town manager or equivalent public or private sector level experience. Section 2, powers and duties. The town manager will be the chief executive officer of the town and have the following powers and duties: appoint, suspend, or remove department heads, employees, members of boards and commissions. The police chief, fire chief, and DPW director appointments must be confirmed by the town council. I want to pause here for 1 minute and clear up one little item. It's been suggested that somehow the Charter Commission is either supportive or somehow responsible for the hiring of the current town administrator. Please let me assure you that nothing could be further from the truth. The Commission does not endorse, support, or even enjoy the recent events surrounding the Board of Selectmen, the discharge of the Chief of Police, or the hiring of the town administrator. Any accusations implicating the Charter Commission as being involved in any way is completely wrong. And quite frankly, it's an insult to the men and women of the Charter Commission who've donated so much time to this effort. All right, continuing with the powers and duties of the town manager. The town manager prepares and presents the annual budget to the town council. He prepares and updates a town master plan every 5 years.
Excuse me, Eric, back a slide here. Who said all that stuff that you just said?
That's irrelevant.
No, it is irrelevant. It is relevant.
We'll take questions at the end, okay?
Okay, but don't be doing a one-sided thing, that's not true.
Go on.
Supervise and direct all town departments, agencies, and offices, with the exception of the schools. Fix the compensation for town employees. Assist the town council and attend at all meetings. Execute contracts, negotiate union contracts, develop and revise a personnel management plan. And there are other duties that are listed in the charter. One thing I do want to point out, all contracts, although negotiated by the town manager, are subject to funding by the town council. So there's a system of checks and balances there. No contract is effective if it's not funded. Section 4, under removal, discipline, or suspension, this is of the town manager, requires a supermajority vote of the full council at a council meeting. School committee. Really, there's no changes in the school committee. We pretty much took what was in our current bylaws and put it into the charter. There's no changes in the makeup, the way they're elected, or the way they operate. So Article 5 is the administrative organization. And in Section 1, this section authorizes the town manager to develop an organization or a reorganization plan for the town departments and agencies to be filed with the town council. The plan may establish, reorganize in whole or in part any agency, consolidate, abolish any town agency or department, establish operating divisions for orderly, efficient town business, include bylaw changes needed to accomplish the desired reorganization, because some of these things are addressed in the town bylaws. And the town council must approve or disapprove the plan after holding at least one public hearing. So the mere fact that the town manager might want to make the changes, he's got to convince the council, and the council has to have a public hearing so that the residents have a vote. Or input, I guess is better stated. Section 2, merit principle. All appointments and promotions of town employees must be based on the merit and fitness demonstrated by examination, past performance, or other evidence of competence and suitability. Appointments are made by the town manager, and in some cases of various boards, and in some cases are confirmed by the town council. Article 6 is fiscal and financial procedures. This was one section very near and dear to my heart with my experience on the Appropriations Committee, as it was with some of my fellow council members, commission members rather. So the annual budget process kind of goes like this. I'm going to slow down a little bit on this one so everybody can kind of grasp it, because it's not complex, but there's a lot of moving parts. The town manager shall set policy and procedure for preparation of the town budget. The town council shall hold at least one public hearing on the budget. The process shall include: the town council and school committee shall meet to review the financial status of the town. The town manager and the town council shall meet to discuss the council's priorities for the upcoming budget. The town manager and the superintendent of schools meet to discuss the upcoming fiscal year budget. The town manager submits a proposed budget to the town council by May 1 that includes the school department budget. Now, the town council may amend the budget, but they must adopt the budget by June 1 of each year. The thought process here, folks, was to pull together the stakeholders, including the residents at the public hearing, so that the budget is developed not in a vacuum, but hopefully, I mean, you can't force people to cooperate, but if the process is there, hopefully it will bring them together to cooperate and work toward common goals. Capital improvement plan submitted concurrently with the annual budget. The town manager must submit an annual capital improvement plan, and the plan must itemize and a justification of all capital improvements, cost estimates and financing recommendations. And again, the town council may amend the capital improvement plan, but must pass it by June 1st. Also in the fiscal procedures, an independent audit is called for annually that requires the council to provide for an independent audit annually by a certified public accountant or an agency of such accountants. That's not unlike we do now. The town does have an audit done annually. Section 4, financial management standards. This section authorizes the council to pass bylaws establishing reasonable standards relating to the financial systems and practices. Standards shall conform to modern concepts of financial management. We put a lot of emphasis on proper financial management in the charter. Let me see, okay, Article 7 highlights the town elections. So this is where some other changes have come about. The general elections would be now held in early June instead of moved from April. Preliminary elections, if required, will be held 5 weeks prior to the general elections. Article 8 is all about what we call the citizen relief mechanisms. I just want to remind you, take a second here and remind you that Article 2, Section 4 ensures that all meetings of the Town Council and subcommittee meetings shall be open to the public and the public shall have the opportunity to be heard. So Article 8 was developed to preserve and enhance the rights of the public to reverse council and school committee decisions, bring initiatives forward for consideration, and recall elected officials. All of these options are not available to the residents under our current system. The Charter Commission recognized that in any form of government, as we've all seen in recent weeks, decisions can be made that are not representative of the will of the people. Article 8 provides for a reversal of such decisions, as well as a mechanism for residents to bring a measure up for consideration, much like a petition article at a town meeting does now, and a recall provision to remove an elected official from office. So Section 1 outlines the form and content of a petition that it must be in. Petitions to the council or school committee requires that the council or school committee to hold a public hearing and act upon all petitions submitted in proper form within 3 months. So it ties the council's hands. They have to hold a public hearing and they have to act upon it within 3 months. They can't put it in a drawer and forget that it exists. Citizen initiative measures. This process allows citizens to petition the town council or the school committee on a particular initiative, much like a citizen warrant article does now. The council or school committee must act upon the petition within 30 days. If the council or school committee rejects a petition, petitioners can file a supplemental initiative petition requiring the measure to appear on the ballot of the next annual town meeting. So it kind of gives a second bite at the apple, if you will.
Meeting or election? You stated meeting.
No, election. My apologies. So if the council shoots it down, if initiative is brought forward, the council shoots it down, there's a process in here that you can force it to go to a town election and let the whole town vote on the measure. There's also the citizen referendum procedures. This process allows citizens to file a petition in protest of a council or school committee measure, causing the council or school committee to reconsider their initial measure, the initial vote. If not rescinded, the question shall be submitted for determination by the voters at either a special or annual town election. And here's the interesting thing, folks. While being considered, the initial measure shall be suspended. So the measure cannot move forward if it's being protested. Measures with conflicting provisions. This just is if two measures go to a town election that conflict with each other, and it could happen, the one that gets the highest number of votes prevails. The citizen recall procedures. This section allows a recall procedure for any elected official. A person recalled who resigns during a recall proceeding may not be appointed to any elective office in town for 2 years. I do a little bit later, I'm going to kind of go over how that process works real fast. So Article 9, periodic review of the charter. The council shall provide for a special committee to review the charter and recommend updates every 10 years, each year ending with a 0. So if the charter is enacted in April, it's 2016, and 4 years will be the opportunity to make adjustments to the charter. and then every 10 years thereafter. The council must act upon the committee's recommendations within 90 days. So the council can't bury the recommendations of the committee. The same thing holds true for bylaws. So each year ending in a 5, the same process takes place as it relates to our bylaws. This helps ensure that both the charters and the bylaws stay current with the needs of the community. I know it sounds corny, but we had to throw this in here. I think it's important that it requires all elected or appointed officials to take an oath of office and to receive a certificate of such oath from the town clerk. I'm old-fashioned, that means something to me. Section 9, felony conviction. I don't think anybody's going to guess why this is there, but if an elected official is convicted of a felony while in office, he or she will be deemed to have vacated the office. So Article 10 is all about the transitions. It talks about how we're going to move from, if the charter passes, how we move from the current form of government to the new form of government without any disruption, particularly to the services to the residents. So it was developed to preserve the operations of the town government during and after the transition into the new charter. Article 10 also outlines the methodology to be used during the transition. So in Section 1, it states some things. The section basically states that all bylaws, resolutions, rules, regulations, or votes taken at town meeting remain valid and in force after the adoption of the charter. The only exception to that is this next bullet, that if any bylaw, resolution, rules, regulations, orders, or special acts conflict with the provisions of the charter shall prevail.
Are you aware of any now?
Yeah, because there's things that speak to town meeting.
Okay.
So just as an example, yes.
Thank you.
Section 3, continuation of government and personnel. This section states that all office, board, committee, commissions, or agencies in place now will remain in place until they are either re-elected, reappointed, or their duties are assumed by another office. So if an office is to be replaced by something else in the charter, that won't happen until the new something else is ready to go, ready to assume those duties. Additionally, any person holding office or employment shall retain such employment and continue to perform their respective duties until the provisions required in the charter have been made. This really was put in there to provide for a continuation of government, that there's not a period of time where functions don't get done, don't get taken care of. The charter does come into effect upon adoption. So if it's voted on April 12th, once the votes are tallied, if it's successful and passes, it's in effect. Elections in elected and appointed positions. So Section 6 outlines how the town will transition upon passage of the charter, and this is where I talked about how we'll slow down a little bit here to make sure everybody grasps this. The last town meeting will be held on May 16th, 2016, during which the budget for next fiscal year, 2017, will be enacted. No actions contrary to the charter may be enacted. The town council elections will be held on June 7th. There'll be no primary for this election. So if we have 15 people running for council, all 15 will appear on the ballot. This one time only, the first time only. The number of votes each candidate receives will determine his or her term in office. So the three folks that get the highest number of votes will serve 3-year terms. The next two that get the next two highest number of votes will serve 2-year terms, and then the next two highest number of votes will serve 1-year terms. And from that point on, they're staggered terms, and they run for reelection
Every 3 years?
every 3 years, with the exception of those that on the first year are like serving a 1-year term. They'll have to either run for reelection the next year or not run, but their term is up.
There's also, I didn't see anything here about, if we do pass this, and for some reason a year or two down, it's not working for us, there's nothing there that says, how do we go back to what we have now?
Okay, that's a good question, but would you mind if we take care of that during the question section? Because the other thing I want you to do is go to the mic and ask it so everybody can hear it. Okay, thank you. So newly elected councilors will be sworn in on July 1st and immediately shall meet to establish officers and establish a committee to design the process for the selection of a town manager. School committee elections will not change, just simply the terms of office for that 1 year will be extended to June till they get caught up in the new election cycle. The Board of Selectmen will continue to conduct executive business of the town until July 1st, at which time they will be abolished. I do want to point out, there is a section in the charter that restricts some of the authorities that the board has so that we don't see a pandemium like we've seen the last few weeks take place once if they're going to be removed from office.
They'll be removed, no matter what.
Elections and elected and appointed positions. The Board of Health, which currently is the Board of Selectmen, shall continue until the new Board of Health is appointed by the town manager. At that point, the current Board of Health, which is the Board of Selectmen, will be dissolved. So that Board of Health will be dissolved then. Members of the Board of Assessors, Public Works, Library Trustees, Planning Board, and elected members of the Housing Authority shall continue to serve the balance of their terms. So departments. In the transition section, we establish a Department of Municipal Finance that the town manager must establish. This department will be managed by a finance director and will include all the accounting department and their functions, the collector treasurer and their functions, the assessor's office and their functions. The finance director may also hold one of these positions. The town manager will appoint a town clerk. So the town clerk will no longer be a clerk, treasurer, collector. There'll be a treasurer, collector, and there'll be a town clerk, two separate positions. Department of Planning, Community and Community Development will be established by the town manager. An appointed director of the Planning and Community Development will coordinate the functions of boards, offices, and departments in land use and regulation management, building department, planning department, zoning board of appeals, and conservation commission. Also, just like the finance director, the director of the Planning and Community Development may also serve as one of the other positions in one of those offices. So these boards will be appointed by the town manager as follows. The Board of Assessors, 3 members. Board of Public Works, 3 members. Library Trustees, 6 members. Planning Board, 5 members. Housing Authority, 5 members. And Board of Health, 3 members. So the numbers appointed to each board does not change. But rather than elected officials, they become appointed officials. Okay, this next section, that pretty much is my briefing of the charter. This next section, I'm just going to go through rather quickly some of the common misconceptions and or questions that we have gotten sent to us. So the first one is, the proposed charter will enable low-income housing and fast food restaurants to build all over our town. The restrictions of such development are found in the town's zoning bylaws. The charter proposes no changes to these bylaws, and I think I spoke a little bit earlier about what is required for a change of zoning bylaws.
Eric, excuse me, once again, can you identify the source of this?
No,
Why not?
because I don't have it here.
Is that hearsay?
I don't have it in front of me. The hearsay, this isn't a court of law, Peter.
Who said that?
If the charter passes, will people get to vote on issues like Proposition 2.5 overrides? The answer to that is yes. Issues that must be decided by referendum questions now will still be decided by voters if the charter's passed. There's nothing in the charter that changes those. In fact, many of those are by state law. Other issues of importance, such as the budget, bylaw changes, changes to the charter, all require at least one, and in some cases, 2 public hearings before it can be enacted upon. If residents don't agree with a vote taken by the council on a particular measure, they can force the measure to a referendum vote of the town. And again, if you remember what I said, if a measure is being contested, then it's placed on hold until it's decided upon.
Eric, is that a misconception or a question?
It's been posed as both. It's been posed as statements, it's been posed as questions.
So what is the charter, what's the guidance from the charter
On the,
on that question and misconception?
well, all 3 of those.
If residents don't agree with the vote taken by the council on a particular measure, they can force, will they be able to force a referendum?
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I thought I was clear on that. My mistake.
Can you repeat that,
His question was that if the residents don't like the vote of the council on a particular measure, can they force it to a referendum? The answer is yes, they can. This one comes to us in a lot of different forms, so I'm kind of paraphrasing here. We've seen the dysfunction of a 3-person board of selectmen. How will a 7-member council be any better? I really want to point this out, folks. It's worth noting that any form of government is only as effective or efficient as those people who participate in it. The potential for dysfunction exists in all forms of governance. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there'll never be any dysfunction under the proposed charter. In fact, when we really looked into this, there is no form of government that's accepted in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that protects itself from what we've seen entirely for the last few days. You can find a case in any of the forms of government where things have occurred that probably shouldn't have. The council, I also want to point out the council has very little, I didn't say no, but very little executive power. Most decisions made now by the Board of Selectmen will be made by the town manager under the proposed charter, not the town council. So they really have different roles. The commission also recognizes that the more members of a council, the less potential exists for collusion. That's why actually there's a lot of reasons why we have recommended a 7-person council. But the more members you have of the council, obviously the less opportunity is there for collusion. If the residents, Again, if the residents become disillusioned with 1 or more council members, the charter provides for a recall provision to remove them from office. Will the provisions of the charter cost money? Potentially, yes, it will. There are some potential added costs recommended in the charter. They include a town manager. Typically, a town manager makes more money than a town administrator. It's safe to say if we want a quality town manager, if this passes, we're going to have to pay the going rate for a quality town manager. My guess is it's more money than the current town administrator receives.
You have a figure in mind?
Eric.
If it were me?
Eric, suggestion. People should hold the questions till the end, so people watching on LCAT can hear the question and the answer.
Yeah, well,
But Eric can hear it, he can repeat it, you have a figure in mind.
do I?
Well,
Not our job.
you must have discussed it, you have a figure in mind.
Oh,
No, we haven't discussed what we would, because it's not our role to recommend an amount. That truly would be up to the council. The finance director. The charter has provided for this position to be an additional responsibility of an existing position, keeping the cost down. Does that mean that's what the town manager will choose? No, it doesn't. We're not going to try to fool you here. Does the finance director cost the town more money? Yes, it does. Personally, I think it's well worth it. Probably save us that more than. Director of Planning and Community Development, the same thing as the finance director. Will that cost more money? Yes, it will. The clerk's position, I spoke to you earlier how we've separated the clerk, treasurer, collector to a treasurer, collector, and a clerk now. So that's a whole new position. Will that cost more? Of course it will. In the town council, the charter provides for compensation to be fixed in the town budget. This question has come to us very frequently. The charter is silent to how much. It's not, first off, it's not an amount that the charter is not where that should be. If it should be anywhere, it should be in bylaws, not in the charter. But did we allow for them to receive a stipend just as our Board of Selectmen do, just as our DPW board does? Heck, as Appropriations Committee, I get $300 a year. Don't everybody ask for it at once. There's also going to be some costs eliminated, although small. The Appropriations Committee will cease to exist. There goes my 300. The town meeting costs, $7,500 a year, round figures, for the 2 town meetings. We honestly believe that there'll be significantly less use of town council. That could add up to some substantial savings. We also believe that this form of government offers efficiencies that will show savings in many other ways. Can I equate that to a dollar amount? I can't. Again, it's dependent upon the people in the position carrying out the job the way they're supposed to. Although most of the costs will be subject to the vote of the town council, we've estimated an additional cost of between $100,000 and $125,000 annually. Again, there's a lot of variables there. I'm not going to stand up here and, tell you anything that's not true. There's a lot of variables. Could it be more than that? Yes, it could. Could it be less than that? Yes, it could. So the last thing I'm going to do is kind of go over a recall provision, because obviously with the events of late, we've gotten a lot of questions on this. So I've broken down, several paragraphs into some bullet points. So first, a petition must be filed that contain the name of the official sought to be recalled, a statement of grounds for the recall, and a signature of 500 registered voters. The town clerk must then issue what's called recall blanks to the first 10 names appearing on the petition. These blanks, the petitioners then take these blanks out, get them signed by an additional different 500 registered voters within 30 days, and return them to the clerk, making a total of 1,000 signatures, or roughly, actually it's less than, 10% of the town voters. The clerk then submits the completed petition to the town council. The town council, and this is a whole paragraph, though it's the council does some stuff, the president does some stuff, they must officially notify the official who is the subject of the recall. The official who's the subject of the recall has 7 days to resign from office. If the official does not resign, the council must order an election to be held between 64 and 90 days from the date the petition was certified by the clerk. So if the petition is certified by the clerk before it goes to the council. So they've got to back up to that date and have an election between 64 and 90 days. If the official is recalled by the election, it's effective immediately. Let me talk a little bit about the numbers. The council chose the number of signatures because we felt that a recall is an issue of seriousness. And it shouldn't be so easy that a special interest group could force a recall, but yet it needs to be obtainable to gather the required signatures. We felt that if 10% of the registered voters couldn't get together to sign a petition, then perhaps a recall was not in order. It's only 10%, or it's actually less than, I think we have about 11,000 registered voters. So 1,000 represents less than 10% of the registered voters. That is my presentation, and I know you're all tired of hearing me talk. Just two other quick items before I go. I talked a little bit earlier about what requires a two-thirds vote of the council. Remember, it's a 7-person council, so 2/3 would have to be 5 members. These are by state law: borrowing money, amendments to the town charter, adoption or change of zoning ordinances or zoning bylaws, establishment of historic districts, a tax override procedure, which does go to a ballot question too, regional school districts purchasing land, these are all by state statute, establishment of agricultural incentive areas, the rescission of restrictions of Article 97 lands, and I have here, for example, to remove a conservation restriction or an agricultural preservation restriction on town land. And the last one is taking of land or easements by eminent domain. They all require a 2/3 vote of the council by law.